Hi there, and welcome back to another conversation here with CMG Consulting. Today I'm joined by Kim Scribner, a colleague of mine, and Sarah Smith, who has done fabulous work with us and on behalf of our clients. Both of these fine individuals are super wicked smart and very, very capable in a number of different ways. Today's topic is going to be acronym city. PMO, VMO, what are we talking about in that space? And really how organizations think about getting stuff done and why they want to get that stuff done. And that sort of little verbal gymnastic right there is for me teasing at some of the difference between a PMO and a VMO. And I'm gonna pass it over. I'm gonna actually ask Sarah to sort of riff on the differences between those, maybe define them and talk about why they're different and how they actually add better sort of clarification in one sense for an organization than the other.
Sure. So when we're talking about a PMO, it's a project management office. A VMO is a value management office. And the VMO idea came from Sanjeev Augustine, Roland Kuehler, and Audrey Shear. And Sanjeev is from Lightspeed. It's also something that's integrated into PMI. And it's a really cool concept. I got to actually work with him and his team and learn from them about it. And so it's part of Scaled Agile Framework now, and like I said, part of the PMI. And through the Agile Leadership Academy, I do have the credential of the Certified Agile VMO trainer. Just a little plug there. And it's really interesting. I've done a PMO. I've I've coached a PMO, I've ran a PMO, and working from the construct of a VMO, a value management office, you're paying a lot more attention to what is the end result, what's going to be the end user, the customer, and keeping that focus more there rather than on timelines. And when you have to have something delivered, it's what are we actually delivering of value? So those are
What
the main
I,
differences.
yeah, what I love about what you said was customer focus, right? Because at the end of the day, your customer does not care if your Gantt chart is up to date, if your work board is up to date, or any of those things, which is what our, more traditional project management focuses on, task delivery. And what a VMO tends to focus on is more outcomes, not outputs. And I think that is something that definitely resonates with me and that I help coach organizations to focus on.
And you touch on an interesting distinction. So for myself, traditionally, I've looked at great project delivery as usually kind of a two-headed beast where there's a strategic lead who's constantly advocating for the why. Why are we doing this? Are we staying true to our vision? Are we delivering on behalf of the people we serve? And someone who's a bit more process oriented, not so much are the Gantt charts the right colors, but really, are we staying on track? Are we living up to our commitments in that regard? Is everybody playing their role? And what I what I perceive is with this shift to VMO and value management is almost a filter on the front end that asks the hard questions of how this particular initiative might add value. Now, could add value in a number of different ways. We're more efficient, we're more effective, we have a new value proposition, whatever it is. But it really starts to look at the portfolio of activities and put a filter on it that says anything we do should add value. And I'm kind of curious, did I get that right? Or do you have a different take on it?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're always going to have a project manager, right? That's a role that somebody needs to fulfill. But I think how they spend their energy maybe is what's different between a project management office and a value management office, right? They have to
Yes.
be more of a partner to the sponsor role that you mentioned so that they're not just saying the project looks great because X% of the things are on track. Because what you didn't say there, Gary, is the track often changes.
Yes.
And so if you are a project manager that is saying, here's the project plan that's delivered, and we're going to deliver it exactly as it was designed, then you're in that more traditional camp that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I also, I've seen instances where there's almost project churn. The energy goes into how many projects, how frequently, reflecting back to the early days of startup culture in Silicon Valley, right? There were people, friends of mine even, who talked about how frequently they were pushing new capabilities out into, their website or their software or whatever, never actually taking the time to understand, is it actually making things better, right? Because in some cases they just kept pushing the next user story through execution, because they had come up with a user story, not because somebody was like, this is actually solving a problem. And so you sort of invert the sensibilities if you go that direction. And I think this idea of value management tries to reset that in some ways.
Yeah, and it fits in really well when you're talking about how are you aligning to a product organization and less about a project organization. So are you running by projects, or do you have something of value that you're actually contributing? So, and
That's great.
delivering.
Could you say a little bit more about how you distinguish between a project and a product-based organization?
And it goes back to kind of what Kim had said earlier. It's customer focused. If you're looking at what are the products that we're delivering, it's what do people care about? What's the value? What are our end users and customers really benefiting from? And if you're looking at a project-based organization, it's, are we hitting the milestones? Do we have, our stoplight colors there, and that's really dismissive of me to say it like that. There are certain ways in which like a PMO, certain things that a PMO works really well for, right? And those processes, in what ways we work in at CMG, those ways are probably not what we're going to be focusing on. We're more focusing on how do you get value through the system in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I think that it becomes more of a when there's uncertainty, a value management system is going to be better than a more traditional project management system. And so when you're thinking about a project-based organization, there's clear starts and stops. Well, in a product-focused organization, your products are constantly evolving. And you don't necessarily know what the next project is until you get feedback from the customer, and they tell you what they perceive as valuable.
Yeah. This is where I get to show my nerd credentials, because I love the quote from Tron, "I fight for the user." And
Yes.
that I use that phrase more often than I can count. And I think that there's some real value there. I mean, we're not saying toss the rigor about good execution out the door, right? It's not binary where it's like, oh, you don't need to pay attention to your timing. It really does mean balancing how you put structure and process in place with the needs to be agile, to make change, to evolve. And I can't thank enough either of you for coming back to this user-centric approach, and the fact that people they're very articulate in like, hey, we could really use this. This would be beneficial. So I guess a question that I would ask, and I'm curious about your take on it, is how leaders might assess the relative benefit of embracing this VMO approach for their organizations. Are there certain either problems that tend to arise that it can solve, or conditions that would be indicators that, hey, you might want to consider this? What would your counsel be to those leaders?
I think the easiest one is we delivered all of our projects on time this year and under budget. However, our users aren't using them in any way, right? That's a clear indication of, cool, we met all of our timelines, but our customers don't care.
Yeah.
So, it helps you to, as a leader, adjust and create the clarity of what are the things we are measuring. And so you need to make sure at that top leadership level that you're talking about the things that matter, so that when the whatever MO, value or project management organization, is thinking about how can I contribute to those key performance indicators.
Sarah, any additional thoughts? I hear your cat in the background chiming in as well.
He's got a lot of thoughts. Unfortunately, we can't understand them. So the the main thing is, you brought up the problem, right? Do they understand the problem? This is something that helps your structure around, Melissa Perry said, fall in love with the problem. And so defining that problem statement, understanding what it actually is, those are key to what we want to do. VMO supports that. It also supports the metrics that you want to track, leading and lagging indicators, right? So
Yeah,
I think often, Gary, you mentioned something earlier about it's not an excuse to not have a structure or a process, right? So I think Sarah and I have probably both battled this at different times in our lives. Like, agilists get this bad name of we just don't plan for anything. We actually just plan more often, focus on customer value. And that's an important distinction between having no process and having the process that makes sense for the problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, and you said it very succinctly there. I just want to play back. There are a few key variables there. Identifying the problem that we are trying to solve. If we can't articulate the problem we're trying to solve, any solution will do, right? So we can end up with a frenzy of opinions and activity, but not a lot of productivity. The other is, the structure and the cycles through it. Agile is not chaos. Anything but chaos, actually, when done right. And I think that that's also key for a lot of leaders to sort of internalize that. It's to say you want the organization to be a little more agile, to say that, to assert that we want to deliver value, and that's a criteria by which we make choices. There's a different rhythm, but it's like doing a different set of dance steps. You're still dancing. And, for a lot of leaders, understanding that nuance and appreciating the rigor around agile practices and the benefits of tying activity and focusing it on delivering value. Those are actually quite empowering to the rest of the organization, because it makes it a lot easier for people to do their jobs, right? They don't feel beholden to do stuff that's not adding value. They feel some sense of agency to speak up and say, hey, I think we might do this better, or we might not be solving the right problem here. And to me, that's also a sensibility that is good for all seasons.
Yeah, I think you hit on something important there, which is people will also feel better in a value management organization, focused on product delivery and impact and value to a customer. There are a few people, I've met some who really love to manage a Gantt chart, but it is more fulfilling to majority of individuals to deliver something of value, right? To see your product out in the marketplace, to see how it's impacting customers and the benefits that they get from those.
Yeah, the deputizing the whole organization to engage with people who use or perceive what your product is, or service, or whatever. But the idea that everybody becomes curious, everybody's looking for opportunities to be better, that validation loop is so energizing for everybody, top to bottom, side to side, throughout an organization.
Yeah. So something you hit on, I think, is important to pause on for a second, because the difference between a project manager and somebody working in a value management organization who's still managing the project is that they're asking different questions in order to pull out that curiosity from the team members, so that they are constantly kind of reinventing what improvements to make to a product, right? So it takes that product based organization and the value focus. And so that means that your skills and capabilities as a traditional project manager, as you evolve into this role, have to be more kind of questioning to make sure that we're vetting out the best solutions.
I love that. Sarah, any thoughts on that skill set and what makes a great VMO contributor?
Oh, when you're talking about a VMO contributor or somebody that's within that organization, it's strategic thinking, but also being able to execute on that. That's a big part of it, is marrying those two. Um, the other things I would say is, how are you, yeah, like Kim said, pulling that information out of people's, and it's asking the right questions. It's being able to be very, to translate from set to skill set, right? And understanding that and having a degree of empathy to where you're not just assuming you know something and dropping your ego, being able to drop that ego.
Crucial do you find empathy to the success of an organization generally?
It's very crucial. I think you have to have a balance of it. I don't think, sometimes too much empathy can go a little bit too far, right? But being able to empathize with, what your customer's going through, what your teammates are going through, but still be able to balance that with your delivery and execution. That's key.
Yeah, I think it's like taking empathy and then also partnering as that VMO contributor with the person who might be struggling like with a high volume of work, right? Helping them figure out where the priorities are based off of value delivery, right? So you're having empathy, but you're not kind of giving them a pass on accountability to deliver value for the customer. So those two have to be partnered together.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Well, this has been terrific. Any closing thoughts from either of you on this topic? Anything that I didn't ask about and you're like, geez, I really wanted to make sure we got this out?
We could do so many more of these. I have so many thoughts, but I think we got the basics.
Yeah. I think just as you're thinking about kind of forming a new PMO or how you're considering your strategy execution for the following years, right? Look for those individuals in your organization who want to drive results, and those will be great VMO contributors.
And I think on that last topic, and this might be a finishing thought, we talk a lot about an office of the PMO or now a VMO. And in many organizations, there's a certain amount of scale that's inherent in that concept. The reality, though, is even very small teams can benefit from this approach, right? Even if it's not a division of labor that is departmentalized, it's still worth saying, hey, what is the sentiment behind value management and delivery? How might we serve our customers better? How might we think about the flexibility and agility to adjust as conditions warrant to better deliver for our customers? And it doesn't mean that you have to like hang a sign on the door that says VMO here. And I think that for me is the sentiment that I want to leave anybody who's listening to this with is this is as much about how you approach your work every day as it is about creating a department or talking about it as a concept that is somewhat academic. No, this is really pragmatic stuff. And asking just a few of those questions can make a transformative difference in how your organization, your team actually generates positive revenue and results over time.
Exactly. And I'll add on to that as it can be tailored. It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't have to be a whole department, just like Agile. It's not a one size fits all solution. It's something we can tailor and make it to where it works for your organization.
Absolutely. So, in a shameless plug for CMG Consulting, anybody who found this of interest, give us a ping, get access to smart people like we've got on this call, myself excluded, and let's get into some conversation about this because there is a lot more here. And I think where it becomes truly fun is when we're doing it on behalf of others, where our users, the clients, are actually saying, hey, this is interesting. This might help me. Man, that gets my juices flowing, and I know it does yours as well. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kim. Really appreciate the time today.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gary.